Oh, come on now. All right, we're connected up with the world now. Hi, world. How is everyone doing out there? And I hope everybody is doing well. A little extra bonus content charge. Leslie Frazier, if the Texans hire him, good hire.
Oh, did that just go down?
No, but John McClain said like he thinks it might.
So,
John McClain
Leslie
does it.
Yeah, and John's great. Leslie Frazier was the coach here for a long time, and I know him well. Elite human being. So 10 out of 10, great guy. And the kind of guy that you want your daughter to go marry.
No.
That said, or maybe your son to go marry, depending, that said, Leslie was never like this leader, this galvanizing, charismatic figure that just makes you want to run through a wall for him. And so I think he's a great coordinator. I think he's a very smart person. Ethics are a 10 out of 10, but I don't know. The version of him that we saw here was honestly too nice. And I think there is such a thing as too nice.
Yeah, I remember he took a team to the playoffs that had Christian Ponder as the quarterback.
Yes,
which is pretty impressive. But then the next year had the saddest football game I've ever seen, the Josh Freeman game.
You remember that?
and I kind of felt like watching that game that like, oh, Leslie Frazier's done, isn't he? Like this is a sign that like his tenure was going to be over. Anyway, let's continue the tenure of this series, and we'll go live. Welcome back to our last installment, going division by division, with some favorite couch guests, looking back at 2020 before we look forward, and making sure we remember the important things before we start all of our fantasy drafts and preparation for the next season. Before we do that, though, I want to remind you, because it is the playoffs celebration, all new players can play for free for a $1 million top prize with your first deposit, thanks to our partnership with DraftKings. Create your DraftKings DFS account and make a deposit. DraftKings will credit your account with a free entry, and then you can draft your lineup and compete for millions in prizes. Go to dkng.co/FBGMilly to play. That's dkng.co/FBGMilly, MILLY. Act quickly, because this offer ends after the playoffs. Minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply, and see DraftKings.com for details. When we get into the details of the NFC South, Charch, and of course, folks, if Charch is here, we're going to somehow touch on the Vikings, but we'll save the, I don't know, best, but it's certainly a team we'll have a lot to say about for the last. I'm not really sure how to put lipstick on the Bears. I mean, because it's David Montgomery, right? I mean, I guess that's...
Yeah, they could start there. Yeah.
Because he's the guy, and I've been saying, Charch, looking ahead to 2021 rankings, that everyone's going to have some running back ranked, say, 10 to 15, that everybody else has 15 to 20, and you're going to end up with that guy on your roster. Now, maybe Montgomery's more like you might have him 9 to 12, and other people might have him 13 to 15. But certainly you're going to be able to take a stand on these running backs because of how deep it is, and you're going to get your guy. Do you think there's any chance Montgomery is one of your guys next year?
I don't, based on the composition of this team right now. I worry that a lot of the receiving numbers that help power him as a fantasy player are going to dry up once Tariq Cohen comes back and maybe maybe some other warm body back there. He had 54 catches last year. I think he could easily fall to half that the next year. And as he managed to get his way to 1,000 rushing yards, but barely. And there were a few wow plays, but I didn't see epic sizzle from Montgomery. I thought he was just a product of being the one healthy back who got all the work behind a occasionally competent offense. So that's it.
An offensive line that trended better in the second half of the year. It did. And certainly and I think you're right to say downplay expectations somewhat from 2020 levels, because he was the offense in the second half of the year.
Correct.
Now, he might be the offense in 2021 because they haven't made any changes on the coaching staff or the front office. They haven't. Quarterback, I mean, what are we looking at? At best, Mitchell Trubisky, who's an unrestricted free agent. I mean, so it's
at best in Chicago, they're talking about Deshaun Watson. Because but I think every team that needs a quarterback right now is talking about Deshaun Watson.
Sure.
Which isn't reasonable. So I think your scenario, your probable scenario, is either Mitch Trubisky or whatever quarterback they're able to pick up out of pick roughly 20. What are they picking, 20-ish?
Yeah.
In the draft. And neither one of those scenarios is great. And then also, if you take Anthony Miller, out of that passing game. What's left? Or sorry, not Anthony Miller.
Allen
Robinson.
And they might take Anthony Miller out after Gardner Johnson got in that fight in the playoff game. So
that is true. He might be gone too. So then what's left of the passing game? And then really just stopping David Montgomery becomes all you need to do in week in and week out for that offense as defenses stack up against them. All those things worry me about this offense. They should have moved on from Nagy and Pace. Pace and Nagy should both be gone. Now, I think they made a mistake. It's not too late. You can still, Eric Bieniemy is inexplicably still out there. You can still get the best guy. Although how funny would it be for Chicago if they went out and got the Chiefs offensive coordinator and Nagy didn't work? They go back to the Chiefs and go get another offensive coordinator.
Well, hey, the Eagles messed up. Well, the Eagles fired or let go Andy Reid. There's the Chip Kelly episode. And then when they had to move on from Kelly, they hired basically Andy Reid's right-hand man in Peterson. And then now they move on from Peterson and they hired who used to be Peterson's right-hand man in Reich. So the Eagles are certainly subscribing to that. Well, let's try another one. Let's go back to the well again really quickly. And then, as you mentioned it with Chicago, like Allen Robinson's a free agent. You think he remembers that he had a chance to sign with Green Bay and chose Chicago over them in the sense of maybe forego a few $1 million or whatever it was and end up in a better pass offense with a better organization around him. He's not coming back to Chicago. I would say 10%, 20%.
Yeah, that feels right. That feels right. And I don't think they did enough to try. They threw him 151 targets. Right. So, at least there was that. They tried to keep him involved, but you have to believe that this Robinson probably, if he's correctly looking at his career arc here, this is his last big contract and his last chance at the height of his powers to be aligned with a great quarterback that the likes of which he's never had. And I've been mocked for saying this. I think Allen Robinson, just on talent, is one of the 5 best wide receivers in the league. And you just never see it because of the systems and the quarterbacks he's played with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you have a landing spot in mind for him? You mentioned Green Bay, which is in play. It's not impossible, although they're over the cap right now. So maybe it's not very likely.
Miami.
What do you think? Yeah.
Miami. Well,
Miami.
Related to Miami, by the way, because let's just go off on a side and kind of like a subject of the moment, since you brought up Deshaun Watson. You've been watching this stuff closely for a long time, Charch. Do you think, I don't want to put it at a percentage thing, we can if you want, but is there really a chance that Deshaun Watson gets traded?
Normally, I would say no, but we've seen players able to execute these things and get their way out. And if you've got enough clout and willpower, you can do it. So in the team, Miami's being targeted because they've got all the ammunition to get there. So that I think there is a chance. Now, I thought Tua was shockingly pedestrian this year, Sig, and so, if you're Miami, you can throw Tua into that deal. You can throw picks into that deal. They got plenty of salary cap to throw at it. It all makes sense for them. And I think there is a chance Watson goes. And the fact that the whole world knows this Jack Easterby thing is a disaster.
I know.
How can everybody know? All these players are pointing at him. Everybody internally is pointing at him, and they won't move on from this weird team chaplain, spiritual advisor guy who has just mucked up the works. I don't get it. When it's like this, my comparison is this: in corporate life, you'll get a bad boss will get hired in, and you will see all of these great people leave under the bad boss, and nobody ever points at the bad boss. It's this is, come on, Texans, you can right the ship on this.
Yes. What was the quote? For things to get fixed, Cal McNair would have to fire Cal McNair.
Yeah, that ain't happening. That isn't happening.
Right. There's just, in some ways, NFL owners sometimes are a poster child for how things go wrong when great wealth is just passed down generation to generation. But we will see. The Easterby thing, I love that you led with what's important is that we know about it. There have been organizations where there's been backstabbing and different power games and things like that. But for us to know so much about it is a sign of just how bad it has gotten. The Detroit has bottomed out, speaking about just how bad it has gotten. Brad Holmes. There's not much to talk about here for fantasy because there's some chance Matthew Stafford's not going to be back. I think Kenny Galladay is as good as gone. Marvin Jones is as good as gone.
Yeah.
TJ Hawkinson's going to get targets by default. DeAndre Swift is going to get some opportunity, but what's this team going to look like next year? I guess what I would really want to ask you is, I saw when Dan Campbell did his press conference earlier this week. Again, we're just going to talk about things at the moment, right?
Yeah.
There was a sense in some football media like, oh boy, here we go again. Like, isn't it obvious that the Lions messed up? Did you have any reaction to that or any thoughts on the Campbell hire? And then what were we looking at? Ken Dorsey, Anthony Lynn. I'm trying to think of some of the other names that have been bandied about for offensive coordinator there. But Dan Campbell's not going to be reinventing the wheel on offense here. What did you think about the hire in the press conference?
Well, it seemed ham-handed to me the way that he acted, and it didn't seem like how I would necessarily want my head coach to act if it were my team. I didn't see Dan Campbell coming. He didn't seem. I didn't hear any buzz on him. This is the most surprising of all the hires for me, and maybe I just missed it. Yeah, maybe he's been this brilliant talent that the whole world knew about, but just not Paul Charchian. And I missed plenty of things. But this one was the farthest off radar for me, and it seems like his resume is awfully thin to be a head coach. And boy, I think if I'm the Lions, I would have wanted to err on the side of professionalism and experience. And it doesn't mean that you have to have like a retread, but I think I would have wanted somebody who seemed ready for that job. Matt Patricia was so over his head, and I don't know. I would not have gone this direction. Do you see it differently? Am I missing the boat on Campbell here?
No. Well, I think that what you present is one of the very likely outcomes, right? So what we know about Dan Campbell, I mean, obviously, ultimate football guy. He was he took over for Joe Philbin. Remember when Joe Philbin was axed?
Right, briefly. Yeah, right.
And I remember hearing reports that, believe it or not, they are actually considering Dan Campbell staying on because the players loved him so much, because the team really, and that, I mean, one good thing about hiring someone like Dan Campbell, and I was hoping, and I think most of Detroit was hoping for Robert Saleh in a similar way, although you can look at Robert Saleh's introductory press conference with the Jets, and he's much more measured. Robert Saleh's not measured on the sidelines, not measured as far as really getting caught up in the game with his players. But in the press conference, you could see, like you said, professionalism. Either way, the good news is you flush all the bad vibes from Patricia with a guy like Dan Campbell, who's going to be more of like, the leader in the clubhouse of everybody getting ready to go out, or like Mel Gibson in Braveheart or something. You know what I mean? I mean, just somebody who's going to make because Jeffrey Okuda had some comments, and this is wild for a rookie to even be talking about, the lack of transparency and the lack of trust.
Yeah. Wow.
And Dan Campbell's going to, I think, restore some of that. But, I mean, the hope is that Brad Holmes, and that from most accounts, based on the reaction, that was a really inspired hire when you're rebooting an organization, when you're saying we're starting over. And with Dan Campbell, then you're just going to look at who he's going to delegate to. We already saw Aaron Glenn. And then there's that New Orleans connection, right? So it's like kind of like, what did he learn under Sean Payton? He was assistant head coach under Sean Payton. And while he didn't show a lot of nuance, the best spin I could put on it for Detroit fans is that, and I saw someone else echo something like this, Vinny Bonsignor, who covers the Rams, that was meant for the players. That wasn't meant for the media. That wasn't meant for the fans.
Yeah.
That was really assigned to the players. Like, this is how it's going to be a Detroit Lion now. And we'll see. I mean, I think there have been worse hires, but I think if he's a guy who just sets the tone, and then he has experienced people underneath him that are running the offense and defense. Either way, it's 6-year contract, right? So
yeah, that's another thing. These long contracts for guys with no track record. Urban Meyer getting a 6-year. It's, unless I'm mistaken, that's to me that's a surprising commitment. And maybe if you're the Lions and you've just decided that's your guy, you have that. Maybe it's a commitment you have to make to even get him to come there. I don't know, but
so at least there's a sign that it's going to take patience. They're going to be given patience. It's going to take patience for fantasy next year.
Yeah,
and we'll see. And Matthew Stafford is, I think, absolutely in play to move.
He is, and if you're the Lions, I would move him almost out of respect for him at this point. Here he's already lived through how many reboots has he been a part of now?
I know.
This would be his fourth. I think asking him in the final quartile of his career to go through another teardown and rebuild is a disservice for him based on everything he's given that organization. Mm-hmm. I would, if you can get fair value back, I'd move him. And maybe, we just talked about a team that could be a landing spot. I mean, teams don't want to do business in the division, but it makes way more sense in Chicago than any of the alternatives that we've presented for Chicago.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it'd be, and there's a lot of offenses like Washington, that Stafford could represent a major upgrade for most of the players in that offense.
Yes.
And like you said, if they don't move him, and what's fair value right now? Second round pick? I mean, you can usually get a long-term starter locked in at a rookie contract in the second round. So I think that's fair value. Give Brad Holmes another dart to throw. And if he doesn't, maybe he joins Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders is like, I ended up in Detroit, so I've got to retire. Anyway.
How sad for him, right?
Yeah.
Had he been drafted by somebody else,
mm-hmm.
who's to say he wouldn't have a Super Bowl ring right now?
Exactly.
I think he's that good. Now, his contract as an aside, because I just wanted to refamiliarize myself. He's under contract 3 more years.
Yeah.
And the numbers are, although the last year looks like a sham year, so let's call it 2 more years. The numbers are doable. Yeah. $33 million this year, $26 million next year. Those are doable numbers. So, I think he'd be an attractive alternative for a team like Washington. That's a great landing spot.
Yeah, we'll see. A lot of interesting quarterback. Indianapolis. A lot of interesting quarterback questions.
Yeah,
this offseason.
Indianapolis. Yeah.
No quarterback questions for Green Bay. How about this? In his age 36 season, Aaron Rodgers has his best season of his career. I think it's safe to say it was the best season of his career, even though it's still ongoing. Mm-hmm. And I've eaten a lot of words that I said, Paul, about how much I didn't like their draft.
Yeah, because, no, but they're not mutually exclusive. We can not like their draft and acknowledge that Aaron Rodgers has had an astounding season, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just wonder. I'm. You know what it is, Paul? I'm a neurotic Steelers fan, and I'm thinking, boy, I wish the Steelers would have drafted a quarterback in the first round when Ben Roethlisberger was 36.
Right.
And the other thing is like not being afraid of how the starter is going to respond when you do prudent planning. Aaron Rodgers obviously took it well. And I guess. Maybe to stay at a career high level next year is asking a lot, but to stay at a very high level, I mean, when we're projecting the Green Bay offense next year, why would it change that much?
Well, there's not a tangible reason to think it goes backwards other than age on Rodgers. Mm-hmm. And what the difference between Aaron Rodgers from last year to this year, staggering, just statistical differences like doubling his touchdown output, and his completion percentage went from 62% to 70%. His passer rating went from 95 to 121. He's had 14 games with a 100 or higher passer rating. Statistically, but just the eye test, he's a different guy. I mean, the version of him that we saw last year looked like he had 1 foot in the grave for his career. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see the turnaround coming. I think I had him at quarterback, 18 on my cheat sheet in the preseason. Totally wrong. Totally misread it. Devontae Adams wasn't going to be enough to propel Aaron Rodgers, and there wasn't going to be enough help around him that even if Rodgers bounced back in a meaningful way, that he was still going to be a quarterback that you could find 5 or 6 other guys that were going to be similar from a fantasy standpoint, and was completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was. I mean, he wasn't in anyone's top 10 that I'm aware of. Maybe there's someone out there, but even then, that wasn't as high as he landed on the top 10 place like quarterback 5, quarterback 6, but he was basically an elite fantasy quarterback this year. He was a different person, and not just on the playing field. His expressions, his aura. I mean, there's a lot of talk about what happened to him this offseason, and he really loosened up, I think. And of course, he bought in. So that's, I think, what we saw. And also, I wonder, it seems like for the last few years, Aaron Rodgers has gotten some sort of injury that he's played through, and you wonder how much that affected him. I didn't see that this year where he was on the injury report for an extended time for a knee issue. And I know that the knee issue he played through, I think maybe it was 2 years ago, was something that they said like a lot of players would not have been able to play through that. Anyway, he bought in. He bought in to the short passing, to the early down running, where in 2019 we saw a player who was almost rebelling against the offensive system that he was in with his style of play. And they were at a crossroads of, well, this, if he's not going to get with the program, perhaps that also played a bit into their decision. But now that he has, it's terrific. We're going to watch it again on Sunday against Tampa, the one team that made him look bad this year. But it's an offense, I think, that now that he's bought in and he still gets to improvise and make those ridiculous Aaron Rodgers plays, you're getting the best of both worlds. Aaron Jones still looks great. I have no idea how to prognosticate if he's coming back, because A.J. Dillon looked pretty good when he got
I think he's not coming back. I just think from a money standpoint. So they're $25 million over the cap right now, and they need to sign their center. Corey Linsley's great.
Yes.
And, really key. If you give me here's the one biggest difference maybe from Aaron Rodgers from last year to this year. He was the least pressured quarterback in the NFL. And, that means so much to that team, and they put so much equity into that offensive line. And I think if it comes down to Corey Linsley or Aaron Jones, I don't think it's close. I think Jones feels much more replaceable, and I think Jones is great back. But Jamal Williams has run well. A.J. Dillon getting a surprising amount of work at the end of the year. I think this is an 80% likelihood Jones is gone. Do you see it differently?
Yeah, it's tough. Well, the one scenario where I see Jones coming back is that he goes out and tests the market and can't get better than like Melvin Gordon's deal last year. 2 years, $16 million, something like that, $8 million, $10 million guaranteed. And if Green Bay is willing to, we saw Randall Cobb come back to Green Bay. In general, we see Green Bay sign players to extensions below what their market value would have been if they had just waited. David Bakhtiari, the latest. So obviously they encourage some loyalty from their players. But again, Miami. It's just always send everybody to Miami. Deshaun Watson, Allen Robinson, and Aaron Jones all walk into a bar. And here's your AFC champion. Hey, that's where LeBron, he did his thing down in Miami. That's the next. Everyone says, I don't want the NFL to turn into the NBA. But, I don't know who's friends behind the scenes there. Devontae Adams, go ahead.
Let me ask this. If Jones goes, how do you see the ball distribution going among presumably Williams, also a free agent, and A.J. Dillon? But Williams will be cheap, so I think he's a lot more likely to come back. I think $2 million a year is going to be plenty for Williams. So if Williams is there and Dillon's there, do you believe that will be a roughly even split next year? Do you see? Yeah.
Look, at times Jones and Williams were a roughly even split, and Williams did not play or fall short of expectations in a way to say that was forcing Williams onto the field, because Williams had a little more well-rounded skill set, maybe as a pass blocker, so that you could have more versatility. So I think actually, if they bring back Williams and let Jones walk, Dillon's going to be the one with the skyrocketing ADP that everyone's going to be all over. He's going to be like Derrick Henry light or something like that. Yep. But the guy that I'll probably take 10 rounds later is Jamal Williams.
Yeah, and if it's going to be a roughly even time split, Williams, you're right. I think Dillon's going to feel sexier, and people are going to look at his 5.3 yard per carry average, and they're going to start speculating what a guy his size can do with a lot of carries. Williams is there to muck up the works, and that's going to worry me. And you're right that the ADP, I don't know if it'll be 10 round, but the ADP differential will probably tilt me towards Williams.
Devontae Adams, a big story. If you spent your first round pick on Devontae Adams, you were really, really happy. You probably went deep into your playoffs. Again, no reason to think things are going to change there. Allen Lazard, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, there's a little bit of a debate going into the year. Lazard comes out hot, gets hurt. Valdes-Scantling has some time moments, but he's still Valdes-Scantling. He's always going to be. I think he's always going to leave his team wanting more, and because of that, if we're going to look to anybody, we'd look to Lazard. And of course, there's still some players to fill in. We have the emergence of Big Bob Tunyon. Big Bob Tunyon. He's a restricted free agent next year. We'll see. I bet they'll give him a first round level tender. They should. And we'll see. I mean, maybe in some ways too, Charge, I guess we should say some of these decisions are going to hinge on if they win the Super Bowl, right? I mean, if they win the Super Bowl, Aaron Jones is probably gone, the Super Bowl inflation effect. How do you feel? You feeling conflicted at all? What are your, as a Vikings?
Oh, you don't know the half of it. So, what people, everybody that's watching right now or listening, they all know that The Vikings and the Packers are hated rivals, both directions. And I understand that Chicago's the traditional rival for Green Bay, but Chicago's been so bad for so long. Really, for my lifetime, Green Bay's biggest rival's been the Vikings, and it's been Vikings Packers that have won, I don't know, like 3/4 of the division titles for the past 20 or 30 years. So it's a huge rivalry. But what people don't necessarily realize is the Twin Cities is basically is on the border of Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So when these Packer fans that grow up in Wisconsin, they love the Packers, and then they get to they get out of college, they went to UMD Madison or UMD Eau Claire, U of W Madison, U of W Eau Claire, and then they decide they want to get a job or see a building taller than a silo. Mm-hmm. Here they come to Minneapolis, St. Paul, to the Twin Cities, and now my whole city is just overrun with Packer fans. And having already lived through one Super Bowl championship, actually a couple I've lived through, man, that's an insufferable group in your town. Let me tell you, that's the worst part is the sort of righteousness of the Green Bay fans in Minnesota territory geographically. It's that part is not fun, Sig. It's tough on the soul.
It is. I get it. And I think that Packers fans wear it almost proudly too. I mean, there's some pride to making other fan bases not like you as a fan.
Yes.
To living rent free in your head and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it.
And it's the tiny little town of Green Bay that somehow still has an NFL franchise, like a throwback to the 20s, owned by the city, basically, and so on. So I get it. And we'll see. But I'm glad that you highlighted that. And it's really giving me an idea that maybe in the offseason, I'll get all of the fantasy football analysts through. And instead of talking about football at all, we'll just say, tell me about your area. Tell me about.
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah. It's all very interesting. It's all very interesting. Also, even some of the different backgrounds of like the ethnic groups and religious groups that originally settled places and how that shows up and things like that, because every place is unique. Everybody should be proud of where they came from. There's always some reason to feel like, hey, I'm a person of this place and it's special because of this, whatever it is. And certainly, well, how do we cast this Viking season, right? Because at first it was, let's try to compete. Let's try to contend. Then it was actually a surprising, honest self-scouting of the team mid-season. I think of it like the Yannick Ngakoue trades.
Yes. Yep. That was the line in the sand, I think.
Right.
The obvious one. Yep.
And part of what happened and part of the story in fantasy is that the defense was honestly on the fly being rebuilt.
Yep.
And it changed the blueprint. But what we did see, I think, is hope, because I think we talked early in the season, or certainly the subject came up early in the season, like, ooh, he just signed Mike Zimmer to an extension. Well, actually, the defense started to play better as the season went along, and some of these young players started to play bigger roles or better in the roles they had. And, there's a lot of hope, I think, for this team to not have a multi-year doldrums period, but bounce right back. What's the mood about the Vikings around you, where everybody's thinking Vikings except the Packer fans?
Well, it's not like we need to rebuild. There was a time about this team headed into week 8 with one win, and at that point it was melt everything down. We are ready to just start over, and everything's not worked. But then the team went on a long winning streak. They were playing meaningful games in mid-December and didn't bow out until like week 16, at which point they were mathematically eliminated. But every reasonable Viking fan understands the offense wasn't the problem. The offense was really quite good for most of the season. They just coaxed the best year out of Kirk Cousins. You saw, obviously, Dalvin Cook emerged as arguably the best running back in the NFL. He put up 1,500 rushing yards, chipped in another 300 plus receiving yards, and was absolutely dominating at times. And then Justin Jefferson was electric. And to pass Randy Moss's rookie records in anything is an awfully impressive, and he did it in 2 categories, and then set the Super Bowl era record for yards for wide receivers across any team.
Yeah.
So that part, those are all things we're hanging our hat on. And here in Minnesota, defensively, total disaster. defensive line lost Daniil Hunter, which was an epic, massive loss. One of the 5 best pass rushers in the NFL, lost him for the whole season. And then they had a COVID opt-out for the run stuffer, Michael Pierce, who they had brought over from the Ravens. That was tough. Then Anthony Harris got knocked out for the season early. And not Anthony Harris, sorry. Anthony Barr got knocked out for the season very early. I think he played like 2 games, maybe 3 games, and he was knocked out. And then they lost all 3 of their starting cornerbacks in free agency, and the guys they had to replace them. They had a first-round pick that they put a first-round pick at cornerback. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, Jeff Gladney, which didn't end up paying off dividends in a meaningful way, and so yeah, there were a lot of reasons to feel like the defense should be better next year. Getting the injured players back, getting Michael Pierce back, 2 seasons in on their 2 rookie cornerbacks. Hopefully all those things will help the defense next year. I don't think anybody's going to be pointing the Vikings to a Super Bowl next season, but the feeling is the offense is playoff ready, and the defense just needs to be okay this year.
And they were a better team than Chicago. Like, we all deserve to see them in the playoffs. It was some of the games they lost, the Seattle game, the Dallas game, which was like
tough losses. Tennessee game, which went down to the very end. And, bad loss.
Well, but look, let's stay positive, right? Because they signed Kirk Cousins that extension before the season. He was great. He was great.
Yeah, he played really well.
And for fantasy, the downgrade in defense helped upgrade him, along with
it did
Jefferson, and then Justin Jefferson. You mentioned Dalvin Cook. There's not much more to say except he's going to go what, 2nd, 3rd, 4th.
He'll be a top 3 pick.
If you don't draw that one, and they look smart for paying him. Sometimes
how about
running back is so important to your offense.
Yeah,
because Alexander Madison, whatever he is, he's nowhere near Dalvin Cook. Adam Thielen, probably in the autumn of his career at this point, but he actually is still a good counterpart to Justin Jefferson. Let's do some Justin Jefferson appreciation. He had Randy Moss on one of his cleats when he didn't he have those special cleats.
He did.
And I think when you were on before, we did a little tangent on the gritty, but it came up first of all, Charch, have you worked on your gritty at all?
I haven't. No. And if I had, I'd whip it out for you right here.
Yeah.
I mean, the gritty. But I haven't really put a little practice into that, but it's a good dance. I mean, there are a lot of rookies that walk into the league and they've got their own signature dance. I mean, that takes a little bit of guts. Yeah.
And it became like the dance, like I don't know how many different
other players were doing it.
Oh, right? It was everywhere. And as I've pointed out, and I apologize if I'm putting you through this again, but I'm saying this in the chat room too. And I'm going to say it because down in New Orleans, New Orleans loves itself some New Orleans. So, I brought up like Honey Badger and Leonard Fournette representing the 7th Ward last Sunday. The dance, the gritty, was actually invented by one of Justin Jefferson's teammates here in high school, Alan Davis. And then it goes, nationwide, and Kirk Cousins even did it, although Kirk needs to work on his. And I want to say that they were saying like Matt LaFleur needs to work on his too. But I mean, you got to know it because he was just in nobody's head could he have possibly been this good right out of the gate. And I don't know what I would say he showed things that we didn't even see at LSU, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
This year,
especially out wide, right? So they, when we drafted him, we were really nervous because he had spent 80% of his LSU snaps running from the slot, or at least his previous year, and so we weren't clear on what he could do outside. And when the Vikings moved him outside about week 4 or so, is when the whole trajectory changed for him, and he was so lethal. It's the route running, Sig, more than anything else, and he does have. There's a lot of good things to his game. And, when you have a 1,400-yard rookie season, there's going to be a lot of good things. But the thing that jumps off the page as a rookie is the separation that he gets and the route running that puts him on the ball so often and gets him open. And he was also a great contested catch guy. So even when he didn't get open, man, does he battle for balls. And really, he's not Stephon Diggs, but so many of the same traits. And from a Viking standpoint, that rolled into the season deeply in trouble on the cap hit, in the cap, to be able to go minus $30 million on that Diggs for Jefferson swap and get 6 years younger feels pretty good.
Yeah.
So, we were able to placate ourselves as great as Diggs was this season. I think most Viking fans would would rather have Jefferson at this stage and at this price.
Yeah, I've called it the winningest trade in sports history. Because both teams got exactly what they wanted. What they wanted. And with Jefferson, like you mentioned, the route running and separation, and he just had, and let's remember a couple of things, by the way. You mentioned Danielle Hunter. I just want to point out, it was a tweak until it was a season-ending injury.
Yeah, correct. It was a tweak. Yes.
So we'll keep that in mind come August if we hear a player's not practicing, a veteran player hasn't practiced yet. It was just a tweak. But with Jefferson, he wasn't even the number 2 receiver to open the season. It was Olabisi Johnson.
It was. And I remember talking to you right before the start of the season. I was like, they're all talking up Olabisi Johnson all the time. And, Jefferson looks good, but, Johnson is going to start the season, and we didn't know when the handoff would happen. Well, the handoff happened pretty fast. And Jefferson, roared through, and it looks like he will not win Rookie of the Year, right? I think it'll be
Herbert,
but it's a 2-man race.
Yeah, I mean, both of them were historically good for a rookie, and the best is yet to come here. With Jefferson, like you said, it took a few weeks, and physically he just looks so impressive, and he's just so aggressive and dictating the terms to all of his combatants. Whether it's his route running or his running after the catch or his ability to catch in the air, he's just got the eye of the tiger. And may it continue, because boy, is he fun to watch. And boy, is this offense fun to watch. Is the best still yet to come? Is it coming for Irv Smith in 2021? Yeah,
we saw real development from Irv Smith. And Kyle Rudolph is $8.5 million on the cap next year. I think there's a good chance Rudolph's gone. So Irv Smith's next year projects very well. His dynasty projects very well. And just the fact that they gave him so many more routes to run as the season went on, and we saw the real uptick in production. We're talking about a guy who had 5 touchdowns in the final 6 games of the year. So, when this team wanted to seize, and gave him opportunities down the stretch, he really did take them. By the way, I'm referring to his final 6 games of the year, because he had some games missed in there. But it was really nice development from him. He was the youngest player in the NFL 2 years ago.
Right.
And even last year, he was still one of the youngest players in. And so I think this year, as he hits like 23 years old this coming season, he really does have the potential to break out.
And you look over the roster, the free agents, not exactly, any key pieces, I think, that they're looking at. Like Eric Wilson's going to be a free agent, Anthony Harris, who they franchise, is going to be a free agent.
Yeah.
But
that's about it.
Yeah.
There aren't notable free agents for team. Now they're $13 million over the cap, projected cap right now. So Harris might go, but that doesn't affect us from a fantasy standpoint a lot. They'll lose a starting safety. They'll have to figure something out.
Yeah. So congratulations, I think, for the Vikings nailing the Stephon Diggs trade. And, maybe it isn't necessarily something that puts them in a Super Bowl window, but they're going to be better, I think, this year than they were halfway through the season, as you said. And they're probably better than most people remember them last year. So, Vikings fans, typical. We'll see. Right now, it's the Bills' turn to potentially break out. But at some point in this decade, we have a revisited Vikings run, at least deep into the playoffs, for the fans to get excited again.
Sig, I shouldn't have to go my entire adult life without seeing my team even make a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's disheartening to say. And it's not like, so the only NFC teams that have not made a Super Bowl since 1990 are the Lions and the Vikings.
Right.
The Lions have never been good. The Vikings have been good most of my life.
Right.
I've been alive for 6 NFC Championship games, and they've lost them all.
Yeah. Well, it'll never get worse than Gary Anderson. That will be something that, the football gods are just cruel to the Vikings, but hopefully eventually there's some sort of release. I got you before we sign off, any rooting interest for you other than against the Packers in the Final Four teams?
Who doesn't root for the Bills?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not root for the Bills? Languishing franchise is one thing, but then just professional respect for what they've done in 2 years. Sig, it's a monument to coaching and the front office that they were able to do so much and turn that franchise around so quickly. And it was built not incidentally through free agency. Of the Bills' 22 starters, 13 were drafted by somebody else. Mm-hmm. These are guys that were, either cast-offs, people who are allowed to go in free agency. They made some trades. Free agency really can work. You can trade your way in. You can accelerate the timetable. This was a franchise that felt close to dead in the water 2 years ago. And here they are now in the AFC Championship game. And it's a reason for hope for everybody that you can have a 2-year window and suddenly look like your whole organization's, the future for your organization is completely different.
Yeah. Alignment of a GM and a head coach, and they bring in Bean. I think Sean McDermott, and we didn't realize it at the time, Charch, he was the first of the new era of Coach Kings. This idea that like the top of the organizational chart is the head coach. I think Matt Rule is a Coach King, for instance. Bill Belichick, of course, the model for that.
Yeah.
And then he brings in Brandon Bean, his guy, to be a GM. And I guess we should mention the Pigulas too, because it's good ownership. It's good ownership just to step out.
It is, isn't it? It really is.
Step back. Yeah. I think Ziggy gets that. I mean, at least with the Vikings, he's not going to meddle.
Oh, he has very little to do with the operation of the team. I'm happy,
which is smart. And then they had a program, and if Diggs for Jefferson isn't the winningest trade, then maybe it's Tre'Davious White and Tremaine Edmonds for Patrick Mahomes when know you're going to get Josh Allen next year.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Maybe.
And maybe, Paul, as like our mass consciousness pulls up on Sunday and we watch another classic conference championship Sunday, that I think if you're not a Packers fan, I said this earlier this morning with Cecil, whenever we preview the games, if you're not a Packers fan or a Chiefs fan or a Bucks fan, you should be a Bills fan this weekend.
Yeah.
And we can all pull together and all concentrate and send our positive energy for the Bills to get a chance, especially because the Chiefs won last year.
So they won last year, right? Yeah. Let's spread out the joy a little bit. And I love the Chiefs. I have nothing against the Chiefs at all. Yeah. I'd have no problem if the Chiefs win, but I got to root for the Bills for all the reasons we just
discussed. Absolutely. So, we'll see. And we'll see what comes. And the next thing you know, it'll be the Super Bowl. The next thing you know, there'll be all the stuff from the combine. We'll be getting used to all these coaching hires, and then it'll be the draft, and free agency will come in there too. And we'll have so many things to think about, and we'll be here. And of course, I should say, everyone here already knows, Guillotine Leagues, that's another thing, but the best is yet to come. And definitely make sure that you're educating yourself on how to continue to sharpen your fantasy football acumen on these new wonderful formats. And I'm sure Paul will do another Guillotine League show in the off season. And it's always exciting. And I think we all look forward to another great football season together, as we put a bow on looking back at the 2020 season. So I thank everybody who's joined me. I thank all of you who've joined us these last 2 weeks. And now we get to enjoy some football on Sunday, and we enjoying football with you because you're so classy.